Hi, welcome to the Times of Israel's Daily Briefing. It is Thursday, January 22nd. I'm Jessica Steinberg. I'm speaking today with legal affairs correspondent Jeremy Sharon. Hi, Jeremy. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Jessica.
Hey there. It is day 839 of the war. Arab leadership in Israel has declared a nationwide general strike over the police's failure to stem the surging violent crime wave that has been happening in the community for several years, coming to a peak in the last months. Nearly all Arab cities and towns across Israel are shutting down today as part of the protest action. We will look at some different headlines. The findings of the public defender's office about the state of Palestinians in Israeli jails. And on a different note, a rally that Jeremy covered recently that resonates very strongly, demanding ultra-Orthodox enlistment to the Israel Defense Forces, to the IDF. So stay with us.
3 million Israelis are dealing with trauma since October 7th. To help Israelis heal, Hadassah is there, with the largest rehabilitation center in Jerusalem, world-renowned medical centers, and youth villages. It's said, saving a life saves the world. Imagine helping millions. This is Hadassah, a life-changing force in Israel and the world.
Jeremy, let's start with this report about Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails. The first question I have really is why? Why the public defender's office? Is this the normal routine for the public defender's office to look at the state of affairs for Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails?
Yeah, so this particular report is important precisely because it is an Israeli state agency. It is from the Public Defender's Office, which is a unit of the Justice Ministry. And the Public Defender's Office in general is the agency which provides legal defense for suspects and people who are on trial, who otherwise cannot afford it or have otherwise access to it. So in this case, they're acting as inspectors for Palestinian detainees for the most part, or also prisoners, meaning prisoners who are people who have actually been convicted. And they are acting in part of their job is to go to prisons and report on conditions there. Now, why, as I said, this is important because until now, we've had lots of reports by international NGOs, civil rights groups, Israeli organizations, and to a certain extent, it can be easy to dismiss this as, leftist organizations, progressives, whatever
Trying
claim
to
you
dig
might
things
have
up, right?
against these organizations. But here, as I said, we have a state agency. The inspectors went to 4 prisons, and at 3 of them, they found really disturbing and highly problematic conditions, which we'll talk about in a minute. And I thought that it was important to highlight this report precisely because it is an Israeli agency. And I should also mention that the Justice Ministry tried, did not release these voluntarily.
Right.
The Association for Civil Rights in Israel had to file a Freedom of Information request to get hold of these reports. They were classified for security reasons for quite a while. And even after the Freedom of Information request was made and essentially approved, the Justice Ministry still resisted releasing them. So this is really the first insight from a state agency as to what's been happening in some of Israel's prisons. What we can see is that the inspectors went to 4 prisons: Ketziot, Megiddo, Rimon, and Shita.
Are those the major prisons where
Those
Palestinian
are
detainees are held?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're also talking about around 9,000, perhaps slightly over 9,000 detainees and prisoners. The overwhelming majority are detainees, meaning they haven't been charged with a crime. I think we're talking about about 7,000 people of that nature, and around about 1,800 who have been convicted of a crime. I also want to mention that the inspectors spoke about the general patterns of what they found, general evidence of the conditions and how the prisoners were treated. They did not give specific details of specific incidents where there is a concern of criminal behavior by the prison guards. That is because in such circumstances, those details, those reports are filed directly and confidentially to the Attorney General's office to determine whether there's been criminal behavior. So as happens this week on Tuesday, the Israeli civil rights organization B'Tselem released details of conditions based on the direct testimony of Palestinians who have been in the prisons. And there, the descriptions of what's gone on was very much more graphic, and even more disturbing than what I found in the public defender's office report. Really concerning reports about rape, beatings, torture, emotional torture and humiliation, these kind of things, which would be detailed in the public defender report's confidential submissions to the Attorney General's office.
The public defender's office had been planning on doing this, has done this before. In other words, clearly there was a sense that there was something going on for Palestinian detainees in Israeli prisons. But what was the reason for it happening now? Was there something additional that they were suspecting or looking for?
No, the public defender's office is part of their job is to visit and audit conditions in prisons, and
Every year.
yes, every year, and the reports we're talking about actually from 2024, because it took a year for ACRI, the Association for Civil Rights in Israel, for their legal challenge to get hold of these reports to actually be approved, and for the Justice Ministry to finally release these reports. So we are talking about reports which were from visits which were made during the course of, I think, from May to November 2024.
Okay. Now take us into the findings a little bit. What did they find, and what now?
Okay, so one of the worst findings, one of the most severe findings, was of what the inspectors described as systematic violence, or frequent and repeated violence, meaning beatings and physical abuse during roll call, which is every day, during searches of the cells. And something specific was that the prisoners complained of being beaten when they were removed from the wing, if they had a meeting with a lawyer, if they had they had to go to the prison's conference room, which is where the criminal proceedings are conducted in a video conference with a court, or to go to the clinic. The inspectors said that on numerous occasions they talked to prisoners who said they were beaten when they were taken to and from these meetings, not just in one, but in at least 3 of the 4 prisons that were under audit. So they also saw physical signs of beatings. Specifically, one report talked of red welts on the wrists of prisoners, and they also said, which is also equally concerning, is that because when the prisoners knew that if they need to go to the medical clinic, if they have an appointment to see a lawyer, that they would be beaten. Sometimes they abandoned that right, for whatever it was that they were going to do, because they were concerned about the physical abuse they'd be subject to. And that's also the same situation when it comes to a kind of a related aspect of the conditions, which is the use of extremely harsh restraints when restraining the hands and feet. The use of restraints is so tight, so strict, that it causes physical injuries.
I noted in your story, Jeremy, that obviously went into the politics of this as well, that we have a very far-right public security minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who part of his task, part of his job are the prisons, are Palestinian prisoners. So what next with all of that, or what were your findings in terms of that piece of it?
Well, so as you mentioned, not only did the public defender office's reports, well, not only were they similar to the findings of other organizations, but they also, they kind of commensurate with what we've heard from National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, who has, frequently boasted about how harsh the conditions are that he has imposed on in Israeli prisons. The Israeli prison service comes under his authority as minister. And it also is commensurate with what a Supreme Court ruling from September 2025, finding that the state had actually failed to properly feed the prisoners, Palestinian prisoners in jails, and that's something which I didn't mention. But the deprivation of food in the prisons is another clear problem which was highlighted in the reports, and the inspector said that they saw prisoners who were exceedingly thin, had ribs and pelvis bones protruding, and lots of saggy skin, showing that they'd lost a lot of weight in a very small amount of time. So as I said, the policies of the minister, the rulings of the court, and previous organizations' reports seem to really, corroborate what's being said in these reports. It's hard to say exactly what comes now. There has been criticism of the Attorney General for failing to press ahead with legal proceedings against people in the military or in the police force who have been suspected of unlawful behavior. So it's unclear. The ball is in the court of the Attorney General and the State Attorney's Office in terms of pursuing any criminal investigations of these kind of incidents. And I don't know if that will be more likely because of greater publicity or not. And there's also the possibility that civil rights organizations can petition the High Court directly to ask that the High Court order the Attorney General and the State Attorney's Office to begin criminal investigations. But the way forward is not clear, and that's to petition the High Court to get the law enforcement agencies to begin investigations is a very circuitous path, and it will take a long time. So as I said, it's not exactly clear where things go from here.
Okay. All right. Let's leave it there for the moment. Thanks, Jeremy. We're going to take a quick break. When we're back, we will turn to a very different subject, which you've also covered recently, demanding ultra-Orthodox enlistment to the IDF. So stay with us.
What if prayer doesn't work? This question strikes us as a distinctly modern one, an outgrowth of the slow disenchantment of the world. But in truth, the question is an old one, and one given space to breathe here.
Welcome to Thoughts and Prayers. I'm your host, Jessica Fisher. Join me on a deep exploration of the relationship between religion and modernity through personal stories, classical texts, and conversations with leading rabbis, scholars, and educators.
You're almost not supposed to be doing this interview.
Our prayers accumulate on God's doorstep, piled outside like an unimaginably tall stack of letters. We cannot give up on the relationship because God doesn't come to the door as quickly as we may like. So let's keep knocking. Perhaps the gates of compassion will be opened.
Join us every week on Thoughts and Prayers, wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay, so this brings us to a rally that you covered actually late last week. Still resonates very strongly, of course, because it has to do with ultra-Orthodox enlistment to the IDF. What we generally talk a lot about here are the protests by the ultra-Orthodox, by Haredim, who are against any kind of enlistment law or being pushed into enlistment. But you covered a rally that was pro-ultra-Orthodox enlistment, in which in Jerusalem, thousands of reservists, their families, teenagers who are about to enlist, their parents. Take us to the spot, describe it for us, take us through it, please.
So, yeah, as you said, we've often covered the massive Haredi rallies against Gius, and this was from the opposite end of the spectrum. And first of all, there was far fewer people than at these big Haredi rallies, because the Haredi rallies are able to bring in tens of thousands of yeshiva students and bust them in. Here we're talking about people who just volunteering their own time, dedicating their own time to come and make a political statement. And there was a lot of energy there. There was a lot.
I want to note that it was at the same location as the most recent Haredi rally, right? It's at the entrance of Jerusalem.
Yeah, it started at the entrance under the bridge of strings, the bridge of cords. Marched down to the Knesset to have a rally there. And one thing which I noticed, there was, first of all, there was a large percentage of the demonstrators were religious, meaning from the religious Zionist community. I thought perhaps even maybe half if not more. But even if not that, those figures were very, very significant. That a lot of the demonstrators were from the religious Zionist community. Because remember, the religious Zionist community, the enlistment numbers from their camp, are really, really very high, and they have paid a heavy price in terms of the number of people from the community who have died during the war, the number of people who have been injured, the number of fathers who have gone to perform reserve duty for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of days, and the community has really sacrificed and done so much during this war, and I think this is a key political problem for the current coalition, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But so not only was there a lot of religious people at the rallies, there was also a lot of kind of religious symbolism and rhetoric. So I saw signs such as there's a passage from the Torah saying, it's a very famous passage. It says, which is when Moses was speaking to the 2.5 tribes who thought he thought they were saying they weren't going to go to war, and he's saying, "Are you going to sit here and not go to war with your brothers?" There's another passage from the Torah which says, "Al tamod al dam reacha," which is a biblical injunction against standing by if your brother is in danger of death. So we saw a lot of kind of religious motives here. And we also saw religious bereaved families. One of the well-known activists is Lalai Deri, and she spoke again very religious terms from at the rally. She's saying, how can enlisting to the IDF, to the army which protects the Jewish people, how has that become a political issue? I think that there was also a lot of frustration. I spoke to young kids who are in pre-military academies, from secular pre-military academies, from religious ones, saying everyone's, saying quite kind of simple terms, we're a part of this country together. Everyone's got to be part of the collective and contribute to the defense of the Jewish people, because as one of these young boys said to me, if we don't do it, no one else is going to do it for us. So that was very notable for me, and there was a lot of emotion, a lot of passion, and there was a certain amount of indignation as well.
Given that there was this, very heavy emphasis on religious Zionists or religious Zionism at the rally, but was there a sense of unity between the religious and the secular?
100%, definitely. You saw, there were several opposition politicians came to the rally as well, and you saw Naftali Bennett, who's religious, he's from the religious Zionist community,
right?
And Yair Lapid, the leader of the opposition, was there too. They met each other and they embraced, and I think that was kind of like gave a sense of how important this is for the entire Israeli society, secular, traditional, religious Zionists, that
To come
that
together.
that first of all, this does require coming together, that this is a really critical issue for the country that needs to be addressed collectively as far as that is possible. And there was definitely a sense of solidarity amongst the marchers, be they secular, be they religious, that this is something which, from their perspective, cannot go on any longer. It's really a breaking point, and that's also how the IDF sees it as well. Because just this week we saw comments from the senior IDF leadership and officers that the lack of manpower is affecting readiness of the IDF to for its military operations.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's critical. And just one other word about this religious issue. I asked some of the demonstrators, I externally and superficially judging them on their appearance, who I deemed probably voted for right-wing parties. I asked several of these people whether, if a party votes for the current law, which would basically reinstate blanket exemptions for ultra-Orthodox men from military service, I said, could you vote for a party which votes for this law? And most of them said no, that would be, a bridge too far. And if they didn't say that, then they said, well, we'd have to really take into consideration, we voted for these parties for a long time.
This issue. Yeah.
This issue would really warrant us to reevaluate. So I think this issue is massive in terms of the effect on Israeli society, in terms of the effect on the army, in terms also on the effect of politics. And it's not going to go away. And I think it's going to be a big part of whatever elections come, whenever they do come,
And whenever they do come, right.
it's going to be a big component.
Thanks for that, Jeremy. Good to get your sense on it. And we're going to close out today's daily briefing. Thanks to you for listening to the Times Visuals Daily Briefing. Stay tuned for tomorrow's installment. This episode is produced by the Podwaves. As always, feel free to recommend us to other listeners and rate us wherever you find your podcasts. Thank you, Jeremy. Until next time, take care and be well.